And I always like the parable of the blind man and the elephant, where there's six blind men and they meet this strange being and they're trying to figure out what it is. And one is feeling on one side and he's feeling on the side and he's like, oh, this feels like a wall. And they're blind men, so they can't see. But to an onlooker, you realize, oh, he's feeling the side of the elephant. And another one is pulling some kind of wire, and he's like, no, I think it's a rope or maybe a bunch of ropes. And of course, the seeing person would say, hey, that's a tail. And altogether, if they speak and they put their ideas together, or whatever they notice, they come to a full picture of an elephant. And I think that's how theories work as well. One theory is a lens to understand some aspect of reality very well, and is necessarily blinded to other aspects of it, or less suitable at least to see them.
Hey there, fellow rethinker. Welcome back to the Rethinking podcast, the place to learn about plural and diverse ideas in economics that you normally don't hear about. In this episode, we talk with Joris Tieleman. Joris is co-author of the book Economy Studies, a book that takes a new approach to economic education. We dive into the book as we delve deeper into the building blocks on which you can build a better economic education. When is it better? Well, listen and learn.
Hey Joris, welcome to the podcast. It's nice to have you on for this pretty amazing announcement. Care to share the news?
Right. Good to be here, Julika. So our new book is about to come out end of October. Economy Studies will be in physical copies available.
Oh my goodness, that's been a while in the making, hasn't it?
Yeah, about 3 years, I think. First, a lot of brainstorming, a lot of sketching, and a lot of just reading, of course, and reaching out for ideas. And then the last 2 years, a ton of writing, and I think, yeah, the last year was even mainly editing, mainly getting feedback from a ton of professors and rethinkers worldwide.
So where did it all start?
I guess the idea was born in meetings of Rethinking International, because we kept running into the fact that, okay, we have all this clear criticism of the status quo. We know roughly what's lacking. We know there's a ton of good materials out there that could make economics courses so much more interesting and so much more lively and real world and pluralist. And yet it's often not being used. And when faculty come to us and say, okay, we get your criticism, so what do you want? There's no ready answer to give. And in answer to that need, that's how this book arose.
So you wrote it together with the rethinking movement with some. How did that work? How do you balance all the different ideas into the book?
Yeah, that was a big search. I mean, so how the big question is how do you write a book from a movement where you don't pretend to speak for the entire movement, because we can't, and we don't want to look like we do either, and yet gather in ideas from that whole movement and bundle them. Because I think 90% of the ideas in the book, it's not Sam or me who came up with that in our brilliant minds or anything like that. It's a bundle of the good ideas and the good materials that are out there. So we did a bunch of input rounds. So first, of course, the main ideas, the core philosophy behind it, pluralism, real world economics, attention for values. Yeah, that all comes from the rethinking movement, and it was more a question of choosing the main principles, diversifying and decolonizing economics, and putting that into a bundle. And then to get input from academics, we did a couple of feedback rounds. So we started with just a couple of open questions. What should be the core of an economics program? What material really cannot be missing, and so on. And we got feedback from over 100 professors on that.
Wow.
Direct email. Yeah. We were amazed by the response, and this also became a thread throughout the project. So several times after we reached out to the same group. I think we reached out. Sam mainly did huge amount of emailing to over 300 professors, and all in all, about half of them responded.
That's amazing.
One or more times, sometimes very like often in very, very much detail, pages and pages of input and suggestions and careful rewrites of our attempts to summarize their field, where they've been expert for 30 years. Yeah, so just draft, put it out as widely as possible, take in all the blows of feedback and process it to something good. And over the process, it became easier and easier. You get used to getting feedback on your work, and at some point you just read the parts that make it better, and it's just a very welcome gift at some point. But at first it was hard to take in a lot of criticism and feedback.
Yeah. I bet. How did you do that?
Together. Yeah, I don't know. How did you do that? Yeah, you just bite the bullet and ask for it. Like it's scary. I mean, we're a couple of young guys just trying to, I don't know, provide an overview of an entire discipline, and that's in a way that's an enormously arrogant undertaking. So we also have to be prepared to get feedback from all directions. And the first time it was scary to ask for it and scary to read it when it came in, and the second time it was a lot better already. Yeah. It
does humble you, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, over the process, I really fell in love with this way of writing. And I hope for the rest of my life I won't write in a different way than open it up immediately, say, okay, this is roughly what we want to do. The aim is to fill this gap of proposing building blocks for a new economics education. Now what? And then just open yourself up to inputs, to criticism, because in the end people want to contribute, and some people just want to rant. And that's okay, they can rant, and there's often something valuable to be found in the ranting as well. So I don't know, I like it. I love this way of working, and it still scares me.
I guess that's good in some ways. It will keep you on your toes if it's still a bit scary or weird. I guess if you get too comfortable, that's also not what you want, right?
Yeah. I mean, I hope I will get more and more comfortable with this open way of working, but it'll always be a little bit, putting out the first version is always going to be a scary moment.
I bet. So you say that rethinking is built on 3 different parts or aspects. How do you call them in the book? You have pluralism, real world, and values.
Yeah. These are what we call in the book principles to sort of always keep in mind whenever designing or redesigning any course or any full curriculum in economics. So I think pluralism, probably the one that's most familiar to rethinkers everywhere, is the basic idea that if you really want to understand something in the world, anything, any phenomenon, you have to look at it from different sides. And I always like the parable of the blind man and the elephant, where I think most listeners will know it. There's 6 blind men, and they meet this strange being, and they're trying to figure out what it is. And one is feeling on one side, and he's feeling on the side, and he's like, oh, this feels like a wall. And they're blind men, so they can't see. But to an onlooker, you realize, oh, he's feeling the side of the elephant. And another one is pulling some kind of wire, and he's like, no, I think it's a rope, or maybe a bunch of ropes. And of course, the seeing person would say, hey, that's a tail. And another one feels the tusk, and all together, if they speak and they put their ideas together, or whatever they notice, they come to a full picture of an elephant. And I think that's how theories work as well. One theory is a lens to understand some aspect of reality very well, and is necessarily blinded to other aspects of it, or less suitable at least to see them. It's like if you have a microscope, you can see bacteria really well, and you can't see birds in the sky. You need a different lens for that. So you need to have a collection of lenses around.
That's such an interesting way of looking at it. That also makes it a lot more clear, I guess, because then the economy is the elephant, and all the different theories are all the blind men.
Yeah, pretty much.
Interesting. So how about a real world?
Real world, yeah. So we have a slightly different approach from popular textbooks like, for example, Mankiw and other sort of economics 101, which say that economics is principally a specific way of thinking, a specific lens in the previous metaphor. And we say, no, economics is whatever works to study the economy. And if you're studying a real world phenomenon, like the economy, you need to not only work with theory and not only work with research methods and with abstractions, but you need to look at it as it exists in the real world. So in any program, students should learn about, let's say, the major sectors of the economy around them, the big, what in the Netherlands, what are main industries, clothing, transportation, and so on, finance, and roughly how do those industries work. You need to know something about that real world economy. And you need to know the main institutions, like how do labor and capital negotiate over wages in the area where you live. This is vastly different in different parts of the world. What do the different ministries associated with the economy do, like the Ministry of Finance? What happens there? What's their job? So that's real world. And then the third principle we have is values, where we say there's no point in thinking about the economy or in doing economic research, economic theory, if you don't at least at some level consider why. So values is about the question why. What do we want to achieve? What kind of economy do we want? What kind of values are important for us? Like the classic split is in current programs, equity and efficiency. These are two very different values. Do you want your economy to be very efficiently productive, or do you want it to be equitably distributed? Sustainability is obviously also a big value. You need to think about these questions whilst rolling out your theories and doing your data research.
So don't we have values in our economic education now, or are they hidden?
Yeah, I think hidden is the best word. So a lot of, and this differs per educator, per professor. Some will talk about it and some won't, but a lot of this, there's a tendency in contemporary economics to say that there's positive economics, which is about, figuring out how the world works. And then there's normative economics, which is about saying how the world should work. And we only do the positive part. Okay, I can approve of that. I like that idea, but you can't split it completely. And a lot of theories, I think all theories in a way, already carry norms inside them. So neoclassical economics, the currently dominant paradigm in the discipline, starts always from the basic model of a so-called perfect market. And then imperfections are introduced, like external effects and so on. But first, there's a perfect market. Now, the word perfect doesn't have to be normative, but it sounds kind of like something good. And the assumption is that if only there were perfect markets for all things in the world, then there would be, everything would be great. And this is an assumption. This is a normative assumption that is never verbalized. We just immediately get to calculating stuff about these markets and working in mathematical models without talking about what different conceptions you could have of the economy.
So they split normative and positive, and then they said they only focus on one, but the other one is kind of always there. You just don't discuss it.
Yeah, it's there and you don't discuss it. And I think this becomes a problem also if you start working as an economist, because you're asked to analyze a certain question or a certain sector, and then you're only able to make calculations and you never learn to think about and talk about the different values at stake. So then if you work in the Ministry of Finance and advise some political leader about a certain question, you have no language in which to discuss the different values at stake.
And you learn that language.
Yeah, you don't learn that language in your educational program. So I mean, I would be totally opposed to telling people what to value, telling students what to value and what not to value. But I think, yeah, students should learn to think about these things and to openly discuss them, and in their advice or in their reporting to clearly identify the different values at stake and say, hey, keep an eye on this. You know, this is the trade-off you might have to make.
So how do you do that? How do you teach that, or how do you learn that as a student?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's not so easy. I think one good way is where you start with the basic economics approaches, like neoclassical economics or Marxian economics or post-Keynesian economics and so on. They each have their own underlying value. Like each of these theories emerged at some point in time, and generally in response to a big imbalance in the existing economy or the existing economic debate. So, for example, post-Keynesian economics is mostly concerned, like if there's one big value where that theory is targeted, it would be full employment. And so when you teach post-Keynesian economics, it's good to mention a little bit of this background in this history and say, this is what this theory has very sharp in view, and other stuff might be less visible to people using to you when you use this specific theoretical framework.
So the unexpected consequences of the theory are kind of taught too.
Yeah, and you can't teach all of them, but you can mention the main areas of focus, and then everything else is kind of out of focus, which is fine. You use different theories to get a fuller picture. Again, the blind man and the elephant. But mention this, mention where the focus of theory lies, and also a couple of areas that might problematically fall outside of that focus.
So why is the book called Economy Studies?
Yeah, this kind of goes back to what I mentioned earlier about real world economics. So a dominant approach today is to teach economics as a particular way of thinking and a particular lens to see the world with. And we say, no, it should be more like something like, for example, conflict studies, where you say, this is the topic, and we look at it from very different angles with different lenses. But it starts from a topic in the real world rather than from a lens, rather than from an analytical framework. So economy studies, it's about the economy, whatever way you study it.
So which part of the process did you enjoy most?
Of the writing?
Yeah.
Okay, wow, nice question. I think I really liked just different parts, but I really liked trying to figure out how to structure it all.
Did you figure that out?
Yeah, going back and forth endlessly. So, I mean, I spent countless days with Sam just discussing, you know, what different. So we have 10 building blocks in the book, 10 areas where we think economists should study at least a little bit in the course of their education, and to figure out what should these 10 building blocks be. And then, okay, so we started with 7, and then a few more and a few less, and then we had 15 at some point. And how do you make them sort of, how do you make sure they cover the whole area more or less, but they don't overlap too much? And that was a gigantic puzzle. That's probably also the hardest thing about the whole project, to figure out that structure. But it was really cool to do. Like, it's just a cool intellectual puzzle.
So how did you do that? How did you puzzle that out?
Yeah, I don't know if I can give a how-to for that. Like, just start with something and then notice all of the obvious flaws in it and try to patch them up. And then, I don't know, some of the building blocks also came in quite late in the process. Like the last building block, economics for a better world. This one is very specifically about how we want the economy to be and about this principle of values. And it just came in when we realized, okay, we haven't really discussed, like, the first 8 building blocks are about the economy as it is today. and just trying to understand that gigantic and complex system, which is a massive challenge in itself. Like some people want to start with changing it, but I think the economy is not something that was built by design and we just scratch it and make a different design and rebuild it. It's in a way, yeah, it's an ecosystem in a way. So you can intervene in it and you can consciously reconstruct some parts, but you can't completely shape it as you want. It's not clay. So the first 8 building blocks are for just understanding that, yeah, ecosystem, I think is a good word. And then the ninth one, yeah, I want to talk about the ninth one as well. But first, the last one is economics for a better world, which is about what different proposals are out there also to reshape the economy in a way. Like the donut economics or like sustainable development goals, or you can mention all these. The blue economy might ring some bells for some of the older listeners.
What is that?
Yeah, I mean it's one of those more or less utopian books. Utopian not as a swear word, but just suggestions saying, hey, let's try to steer in this direction. And students should also learn to deal with those, and then to think about it. What does that mean if we want to make it more like a donut economy or more like a blue economy, whatever. Yeah.
So what's the 9th building block?
Yeah, it's problems and proposals, and that's really about the practical work, more in a sense the day-to-day work of a professional economist who works in an organization, maybe government, maybe non-profit, maybe commercial organization, and is asked to puzzle something out. So you might be working for the municipality of Amsterdam, and they say, hey, we want Amsterdam to become a donuts economy city. What do we do now? And that's a giant question. And it might also be a way smaller question, like you work at the clothing company C&A, and they say, hey, there's some problems in our supply chain where we really don't like the way the employees of the sweatshops are treated. How can we redesign maybe the economic incentives around there so that our suppliers will do a better job taking care of their employees? Or it might be, how do we become more profitable in this area? So whenever you're faced with a concrete challenge like that, how do you go about it? You can't just sort of say, okay, where's the data? And I smack it into my big mathematical model and calculate the optimal outcome. Like there's you have to map the field, and maybe do a systems analysis, scope the question. So all these steps, that's like practical work of an economist, and that should also be part of the education.
Is it now not there then?
Not really. I mean, in some programs, there's courses like that where you really take on a project and puzzle it through from start to finish. An assignment, it can even be a fictitious assignment but on a real world problem. But usually programs don't include this now.
So why is it a problem that they don't?
Yeah, because otherwise you walk up, you walk away from your graduation ceremony with a theoretical toolkit, but without the skills to apply this to a real world problem. And you have like the skills for maybe the central 50% of the process of engaging with a real world problem, but you don't have the skills to start and scope it out, to understand the sector first, and then to propose or evaluate possible solutions. Yeah, that's just an integral part of your job, I think.
So what is criticism you expect towards the book?
Probably mainly, you want too much.
Why that? That's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, so if you run an economics program, you always, or you run any educational program, you always experience it as being completely full already. And you're like, wow, if you guys want all of this stuff to be part of the program, it doesn't fit. It's full. There's no space. I think, and this is a very legitimate concern, but it's also something we can and in a way have to work through. So some things will have to go out of programs as well.
So is that then the problem, that things have to go out and nobody wants to actually take something out of the program?
Yeah.
Or is the problem more getting stuff in?
Well, no, actually, now that you put it, I think it's both. So, I mean, I think programs are often created less by design than by negotiation.
What do you mean with that?
Well, I mean that in many cases you have a faculty where everyone thinks their own topic or their own specialty is super important and has to be part of the program, and everyone's just pushing their stuff into the program, and then something bursts and bam, the 3 years or 4 years of bachelor are full, or the master. So that's like by negotiation, whoever pushes hardest to get their stuff in wins. And I would hope, and I think this is really happening, that programs move towards more a program by design, where it's like, okay, what do we want? Not so much starting from what are people's expertises here that they really want to give to students, although that's of course something always to keep in mind, but more starting from, okay, what do people come here to study, and what kind of skills will they need once they walk out the door, and how can we impart those skills on them? And then design a program from there. Of course, considering what faculty and what specialties you have in-house. That's always a consideration. But start
What kind of skills do we need?
Yeah. A good economist has the skill to has different analytical tools in their toolkit, and both in terms of theory, but also in terms of research methods. So like you should be able to run good statistical analysis. It doesn't have to be super fancy. I think the level that is taught in many economics courses is more advanced in terms of mathematics than what you actually need in most jobs, in nearly all jobs. But the skills to do basic statistical analysis, to do things like interviews and focus groups, to get the more qualitative knowledge in, the skills to scope a problem in, like, okay, what bigger economic sector are we talking about for this challenge, and how does my specific question of this report fit into that? An overview of roughly the whole economic system and the ways it links with social and ecological systems. And you don't have to understand all of that completely, but you have to know roughly the boundaries of your field as an economist, and then at the boundary to know who you'll meet there. Will you meet sociologists, political scientists, biologists there, and know a tiny bit about their language and how to engage with them to ensure that you're not working inside a silo, but that you can reach across disciplinary boundaries. Yeah.
Is that one of the problems economists face, that we are too much only economists and we don't talk to other disciplines, or we don't know how to communicate our knowledge to others?
Yeah, this is something that comes out if you ask employers, who employ a lot of fresh graduates from economics courses, and there's been research done in various countries asking these employers, okay, what skills do your fresh economists have, and what would you like to be better there? And communication is generally one, especially communication to non-technicians or to non-economists. I think economics rests often on a lot of jargon, and this can be very inaccessible to outsiders. And jargon has its place and has its function. It's good to have specific terms, but it's also necessary to be able to explain those to people who don't share your vocabulary. Yeah, so this is something that comes out. And also in research, there's a paper from Marion Fourcade, I think from 2015 or 19, I forgot, which is called something like the Queen of the Social Sciences, I think, which investigates how much economists cite those from other disciplines, and how much they are cited and so on. And then it turns out that a lot of economists hardly cite anyone who's not an economist. Yeah. So I think the communication could definitely be better.
What is the purpose of the book for you?
It should be a toolkit, and it should serve as inspiration. So it's not meant to be like a big statement of this is the perfect program, implement it, or I don't know what. That's not the idea. I mean, whether it's used to design completely new programs, and we hope it will be, and it has been already. I can tell you a bit, but or whether it is to change the content of individual courses a little bit, because it's change, especially in educational programs, takes time. There's a lot of path dependence. We hope it can just serve as a toolkit for those things.
What do you mean there is already something being done with economy studies, a new master or new studies or courses?
Yeah. I mean, it's being used in different faculties. We sent out draft versions a year ago, and the Vrije Universiteit, the Free University of Amsterdam, is creating a new bachelor program starting in 2023. So maybe too late for most current listeners, but we're really, really excited about this. They adopted a lot of the ideas that are in economy studies, and I don't know. I think it's a very different bachelor program from what we're used to seeing, and very exciting to see them launch that. Humane Economics is the title.
What is the most challenging aspect of the book?
In writing it or in using it?
Both.
Back at you. Okay. Yeah, I mean, in writing it was to puzzle out, so as I said, we have these 10 building blocks, but of course, in the end, that's artificial. In the end, it's one system, and there's not somewhere in the middle of the economy a big wall which says, okay, here the next system starts. So,
that would have been interesting.
Yeah. So how do you slice up that reality into distinct building blocks in a way that makes sense? That was a giant puzzle, and every solution to that will be imperfect. Definitely ours as well. Yeah. And in using it, I don't know. We're gonna find out what's hard in using it. I mean, yeah, we'll see.
So I'm curious how you got to writing economy studies. What was the road into economics or through economics for you?
Yeah, I studied economics myself in Utrecht, the bachelor, in the context of a liberal arts and sciences program, but majoring in economics. So I did the vast majority of the bachelor courses there, and I was just really in doubt, what direction to choose between pretty much all of the social sciences. And I picked economics because it seemed like economic dynamics are at the center of so many of the big challenges we face today. And I don't know, I picked up some really useful tools in the program. So that's maybe something to clarify. I really don't think neoclassical economics should go out the door or anything like that. But it definitely has its place, and it has some very useful tools and ways of looking at things. But I was also missing so much. And then on the side, I followed some human geography courses.
Human geography?
Human geography. I think this topic is not very big in most countries, but it's basically like it's in a sense a cross-cutting social science discipline where it says, okay, if the question has a clear geographical aspect, human geographers might investigate it. So this can reach from supply chains and transnational economic sector constellations to migration patterns, to the social composition of a city neighborhood. Any social scientific question that has to do with geography can be part of that discipline.
That's very broad.
It's super broad, and yeah, so I think a lot of heretics from other disciplines find their refuge in human geography, where it's like, okay, your method is not welcome in our discipline because we have a very strict methodological line to thread. Then the human geographers are not so precise about it. They're like, no, you're investigating something interesting and your method is scientific, even if it doesn't match what the mainstream in your field does. I mean, I'm really making a character out of it, so I hope not too many human geographers are listening. But they taught also a couple of economics courses. I did a second master in that. So I did my economics master at the Vrije Universiteit, where they have this new bachelor. And then at the same time, a human geography master at the University of Amsterdam, which is a another university in the same city. And they also taught some economics courses, for example, on the composition or on the structure of Silicon Valley and its international offshoot sectors in, where was it? Israel, in India, and a couple of other countries. I can't remember right now. And I was like, wow, this is a completely different way to study economic systems, and one that teaches me very much about how the economy works. And why is this not part of economics programs, or why is it not even mentioned at all that this is also a way to study it?
Why was that, do you think?
I think economics has narrowed in a way that most people inside the field find hard to see, because we're so used to it. Narrowed to a relatively limited set of methodologies. And for one thing, any qualitative research methods is hardly part of the economic discipline as it's being practiced in the mainstream today. So something like this kind of case study where you investigate how the Israeli offshoot of Silicon Valley came to be, and how it's now evolving in conjunction with the state there and with universities. I mean, in essence, the growth of a local economic sector as a case study, that's something very few economists would investigate, because it doesn't fit the methods that are used with large data sets and very precise and high-tech statistical analysis. Because statistics is not the best way or the best main way to investigate this particular question, so it falls outside of their scope.
Oh, so you miss a lot because you don't learn the other way of looking.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and then you also don't teach that to students. And I think it's completely fine when academic researchers specialize in specific methods. And I think also the hardcore statistical approach that many economics departments have taken has delivered some, very valuable research results. But if you're teaching people to be the next generation of experts of a certain field, in this case the economy, then you should teach them a broader range of research methods and ways of thinking.
So how is writing a book different from writing an article for a newspaper?
Boom, that's a jump. So, I mean, the time is just the main thing. If you write for a newspaper, it's got to be finished, well, not always tomorrow, but this week, preferably, and often tomorrow, or which means this afternoon, actually. Because it's got to be in the paper tomorrow. And so the time, so yeah, I guess a major difference that comes with that is you can't really redefine concepts in a newspaper article. You gotta use what people already know so that the headline makes sense to them. And what I like most is figuring out how a particular part of the book works, and then sort of building that understanding in my own mind and in other people's minds, and learning from other people in the same way. And in a newspaper article, you gotta stay with the existing architecture of how people see the world, and with the entities that people know. So it's hard to really introduce a fresh idea in a newspaper article, and in a book you have the space to do that, and also the time to think through it, both for the writer and reader. Yeah.
And I'm really curious about this. You were also part of Rethinking Economics NL when they started, or you helped start it. How did that happen?
I mean, throughout my economics education, teachers kept saying, if you're still missing stuff, wait for it. It'll get more interesting and more diverse later on. And towards the end of the program, also as I was concurrently doing that geography master, I just didn't believe that anymore.
You were like, I see the end. It's not looking like it's coming.
Yeah, exactly. And then with a couple of friends, we put out an open letter. I think we gave it some grandiose title like "To the Economics Student with Big Ideas" or something, and basically said, hey, we want to start. There's this international network of called Rethinking Economics, of economic students who want to broaden their education. And we want to start a Dutch branch, show up 20th of June, then and there, if you want to join. And more than 20 people showed up.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and we were super surprised. We were like, wow, okay, cool. And it started right there.
So with every guest, we do a little lightning round. So I ask a question and you just say the first thing that comes up. Okay? All right. What is a skill any economist should learn?
Okay, yeah. This might sound weird, but to think in metaphors and to realize which metaphor you're using. Like, are you thinking about the economy as a machine? Then it's very different from the economy as an ecological system. So realize what metaphor you're using and what implications it has.
How do you realize that?
Because you can listen to yourself talk. If you're using the type, because the economy, you can't grab it. It doesn't exist. It's an abstract thing in the end. So you always have to liken it to non-abstract things, like a machine, like a computer. Maybe the economy as a computer can also work. And so listen for the metaphorical language that you're using, and then be aware, okay, so the economy as a machine, that gets me to understand quite a few things about it. And also it gets me to fundamentally miss the parts of the economy that are more like an ecological system, and vice versa.
Who do you look up to in economics?
Probably my hero is Ha-Joon Chang. He's at Cambridge, and he's been working in pluralist economics for 30, 40 years. And he's one of the few economists who are really able to make things very understandable and very accessible without flattening them. So he's just a superb teacher in his books, in his teaching, and in his research.
What is a question you want me to ask that I haven't asked you yet?
Oh yeah, ask excellent questions. I have nothing there.
Where can people find the things that you're working on if they want to find out more?
Yeah, economystudies.com. We have a newsletter there, which goes out every 1 or 2 months right now, because the book is almost being launched. It's every 1 month. That's a good place. LinkedIn also works, but I think most of the announcements will be in this newsletter. So that's the best way to follow it. Yeah.
Awesome. So what are your future plans?
I mean, in the end, the purpose was not to write a big fat book, but to spread ideas. So we're gonna design a lot of different workshops for different audiences, like for student groups, rethinking, or oikos, or otherwise who want to change their program. Like what materials are there? How can you talk to your professor about what you want? What are good textbooks to propose in your area? Workshops also for faculty who want to change and are looking for good materials and good ways to design new courses or to redesign existing courses. We want to start running workshops with academics at conferences, topic specific, like labor economists who all gather at one conference, or monetary economists, because at these conferences people always gather to discuss research, and there's very little mention of education there. And we want to bring that in, because it's at least half the time they spend, and most people reach a lot more people. Most academics reach a bigger audience through their education than through their research. So we think it deserves more attention.
What do you want to tell present and future students? Any advice?
Yeah, keep asking difficult questions. Also, just read for yourself. If you're unhappy with the program, find alternative materials, and don't try to do it alone. Yeah, so find kindred spirits, reach out to them, maybe start a local group, but then don't drown in the organizing. Like, find some buddies for this, because it's just a lot more fun and a lot more sustainable that way.
So final question, what does the future of economics look like? According to you?
Yeah. I would love economics to be a discipline where there's a couple of major frameworks that everyone knows, and that are the basic part of the basic toolkit of any economist, and where people do specialize in one of these and work work specifically in their field and their maybe methodological focus, but are able to exchange ideas across the whole discipline and preferably outside it. So yeah, an ecosystem of different approaches that actually work together. That would be my dream.
Well, Joris, thank you so much for being on the podcast, and good luck with the book.
Yeah, thanks. It was nice.
Thank you for listening to the Rethinking podcast. Hit the follow button on your platform so that you'll stay up to date with all we have in store for you. You can also find Rethinking Economics NL on social media. Just click the links down below. Until next time, we'll rethink again soon.